before we even get started, really, how many people here are aspiring writers? Cool. This is the crowd exactly I want to talk to, because what you want to do is insane right now, and I'm really proud of y'all for doing that, because I want to talk about all the stuff that you're going to be jumping into as a writer, the best ways to get into it, but more importantly, why to get into it. I know that if you're like screenwriter, you're on Twitter, it's usually, especially right now, everyone's like, it's all on fire and I can't find a job. And that's going to be a good chunk of 2023 when you're going to be reading those tweets and you're going to be seeing people reacting like that. And that's from people who have been working in the industry for years. And I've been reading those for the past 5 years, and that is exactly as long as I've been a writer, because I fell into it accidentally and didn't want to do it. And we're going to get into that a little bit. But the more important thing is the reason why, when you hear a lot of those words and you hear a lot of those things about like how their career is crazy and they're not fit for it and stuff like that, does not matter. And I want to give you the ammunition as to why. So today is more about like hyping you up, giving you all the resources you need as a person to be like, oh, writing is a lot easier than I thought. And in order to get into the parts that are very specific as to like, how do I work on this franchise? How do I work in industry? How do I do things like that? Let's see if we can push you towards the right direction by the end of this panel, if that's possible. But a little bit about myself. My name is Mel Brown. As I said before, my original intention was not to be a writer. I was into basically just electrical engineering, software engineering, short stint in the Navy. What short stint means threw me out pretty fast. Was working on the first outdoor slot machines in Baltimore until the riots happened, and then pushed back against the riots. Got into software engineering to help people, started revealing stuff about Goldman Sachs, blah, blah, blah. But that all kind of wrapped around to working with For All Nerds, which is a podcast. And with them, I started doing a lot of editing work, a lot of writing work, and we started bringing in a lot of showrunners, interviewing showrunners in the process. And one of those showrunners, I won't say, thank you. I appreciate you. But one of those showrunners, I won't say their name, but they made a show that rhymes with Schmanimal. And he was just like, hey, could you tell me what you thought about one of the shows I did? And very constructively, me and my partner at the time were just like not real great. But we told him how to fix it. We told him like, this is how you move forward with your second season. This is how you make it better. This is how you represent so many different characters within that series. This is why it should matter to you and everyone else. And so that person left. It was just like, we're never going to see him again. 2 weeks later, got a phone call from him and his co-showrunner, and they're like, congratulations, you're moving to Los Angeles, and you're going to be writing for this show going forward, because now it's your responsibility to fix it. And from there, it's been chaos. I've been jumping into officially writing the origins of Blade Runner, which is a scary franchise to work with. Weird shows that no one hears about, called Calls on Apple TV+. Was it in Shondaland right now, Station 19. I've worked on video game anime for Netflix that haven't been announced yet. Different things like that. But yeah, that's a bit of me. So enough about me in that regards. We'll get back to some of those experiences in a bit and how it's going to reflect on your journey as a whole. Because, as I said, things are a little weird right now. And we're looking at, like, if there were a writer apocalypse and you could pick one, they're all happening at once right now. So you have like all of like the streaming services and networks kind of going down with like HBO Max won't exist in like 2 or 3 months. And that's like just Warner's Discovery, they just made that decision where it's just like we're gonna like create a small HBO tab on our Discovery tab, and that's it. And we're gonna try to rename it as maybe just Max or something. So that way we could trick people into only watching 90 Day Fiancé going forward. Meanwhile, what was it? We still have like all the layoffs happening, which is due to just inflation crisis, etc. Everybody's experienced it in every industry. The way it's reflected in ours is that major studios across the board, from Netflix to Amazon to, as you see right here, Paramount, which is my new company that I've just signed on with, all of them, like every other week, you'll see like, we just fired 150 people and this many shows are getting cut. And the reason why you're actually hearing about a lot of shows where it's just like, we filmed the whole show and they canceled it before it even went to air, and you will never see it on air, is because they can get a tax cut for not airing it. So now it's all about finances, even more than it is about art, which makes that really difficult. So on top of this, there's a WGA strike on the way, coming in May. So everyone within the Writers Guild, which is every writer, every person writing on television right now, they are in a place where they're just like, hey, we can't have so many mini rooms happening, which is like when you have a room that only has like 3 producers and they write the whole season at once, and they're just like, okay, sweet, we're out the door. And they kind of cut out everyone that is new. So everyone is like support staff that's trying to come up into the game, staff writers, story editors, things like that. They never get a piece or a cut. And that's not even including what you see right here, which is the residuals issues, which is Netflix doesn't pay a whole lot of residuals. Digital has a different rule, where it's like, if you are on a streaming service, we don't have to pay your residuals as much. Like if you end up on a network TV show like Grey's Anatomy or something, you hit the lottery and lucked out, because they still pay you like for every time that show airs. But if it's streaming, they're like, technically it airs all the time, so we're not gonna pay you that much. We're not gonna pay you much with anything. We'll give you like a quarterly $75 or something, which is insane because a lot of writers live off of that. It takes a while to write something, and a lot of writers aren't able to make a strong livelihood at this point. So I say all of this because saying that you want to be a writer right now is really brave, but it also is not impossible. And you're going to hear a lot of these things, and with all of this going on right now, I'm still like, this doesn't matter to me, and I'll tell you why. So a bigger issue that we have as writers, as creatives, is that a lot of stuff you see that's coming out right now that is actually making money are big spectacle blockbusters in a way that is a bit more unusual than it was before. Like, you could drop a really dope indie before and make an okay amount of money. Now, the scary thing about that is that is the reason why we're not getting as many original ideas and new IP. We're going to keep repeating the same thing right now because we're going to keep seeing the spectacle make more money. The one thing that kind of like edged out and became something really, really special in that regards and breaks that theory is Everything Everywhere All at Once, which I love that movie.
Genius.
And it broke through the noise. It actually made a decent amount of money where it became profit. But I don't want to pretend that's the only good thing that came out this year. You know, like, we've had like some really fantastic horror, which, you know, that doesn't always make a ton of money, but at the same time, nothing that was like huge in terms of profit outside of like Smile. And when you're seeing a lot of really good stuff like The Menu that just dropped a little while ago, completely flop in theaters, and a lot of like really hard, like basically just like went through tons of production, a lot of work, excellent writing, all of that kind of like slowly petering out and disappearing whenever any of these movies appear, is telling studios now, why do we even want to put money into new ideas? And so that makes it a little bit harder for us to kind of like pitch like, hey, I got a new concept or anything like that. And they're just like, well, that's the most beautiful story I've ever heard. Could you apply it to the Jetsons? Is usually what we get. And that also boils down to a lot of viewership in TV right now, where you're seeing so many people that, like the numbers that we see now, the numbers that we're getting, are in reflection of a lot of new executives are in the house and they're checking out streaming data. Turns out they're not making as much money on streaming services as we thought. So they're just like, we're going to be cutting back on how much TV we make, etc. I think there's compromise solutions for this that are going to suck, which is like Netflix may have to get commercials, which is like, ugh. But at the same time, it allows creatives to make more stuff. We don't have to follow the Stranger Things kids until they're 28. Like we can actually make new ideas and try something else out. But we would have to get the commercial brand again. Basically, everyone will start rebuilding the network model. So why am I talking about all this as I'm talking about the process of like, what is it like to be a writer right now? And the reason why is because a lot of these individuals, a lot of the people who are going to tell you your yeses and nos, a lot of ones that are going to be kind of like standing in front of the gate as you're trying to figure all of this out. They're going to try to tell you, people are coming out of the pandemic, they only want hard comedies right now. Like, my manager just told me Ted Lasso is the biggest thing. Could you give me a Ted Lasso? We want a Ted Lasso. And really, they're just like, we want a hit. I'm like, I want a hit too. Like, I also want like something that like kind of just take off like into the stratosphere and become highly successful, and that becomes the rest of my career. But that's not how hits work. Like, when someone signed off on Game of Thrones, they didn't 100% know that Game of Thrones was going to be Game of Thrones, because the person whose seat they just took just got fired for making Rome on HBO, and no one remembers that show. And it was just as expensive. And you don't know. You genuinely don't know when something is going to explode. Even just saying Stranger Things, when you think about the concept of the show, how did it turn into such a huge hit? Like it's just like, yeah, it's just 4 kids on bikes chasing down like their friend who's missing, and there's another dimension, and it's actually one of 3 stories is happening, and it's all about the 80s. And that's such a huge risk, where the Duffer Brothers actually said they got shot down everywhere, and Netflix was like, we'll just make a pilot and see what happens. And here we are now, where it is just a colossal mega hit. And that's cool, that's dope. But it's also because it was something that they love. It's something that they were extremely passionate about. It's something that like they felt top to bottom. This is a story that needs to be told. This is why. This is how I want to do it. And this is how I want to express myself. So I want to get into this a little bit because so Chainsaw Man is, I know this is a hard pivot. How many people here know Chainsaw Man? Okay, cool. For those that don't, newer anime, dude is basically, I don't want to get into the main plot too much. There's something very central to the plot that should reflect on how all writers work. And it is something that they applied to this story that's so good, I have been jealous about it. I wake up in the middle of the night, my wife's right there, she'll tell you I am annoyed, like, why didn't I think of that? Because there is one thing that is just happening in the background of every story, every fight scene, and every tonal choice that is the most genius thing you could possibly do. And it summarizes writing as a whole. And that is, in this particular world, there are demons. And the demons function over how strong they are due to the emotions of the people that they're interacting with. So if you're in a fight with someone and you are afraid, they have an immediate advantage. Now, the reason why that's so interesting is because it creates moments where it's the more intimate that the fight is, the more damaging it is to the environment as well. So if someone can figure out what would terrify you, what would make you scared, what about your character, what about your development, the things that you're doing, the way that you're doing it, and just kind of like slowly pick you apart, it makes that villain stronger, and you can do the same to them. So that means every fight, if it is at its maximum level, is going to be based in character, which is a key tenet in writing. And that creates this whole grindhouse style of writing. It's doing the most important thing that you could possibly do in writing, which is just every punch matters because it's based on how a person is feeling in that moment. No big spectacle action or that is like just, planes shooting rockets into the air, etc., blah, blah, blah. Or very small story horror of just like, I really hope this person doesn't open the door right now, really matters if you don't care about the results of that person, where they're going, how they feel, and what's leading them to place, and what the conclusion is going to be. And what Chainsaw Man does is add that entirely into the core of how every fight and every scene is going to work, which is just fucking genius. So the reason why I want to bring that up is because your audience, as you're writing, doesn't always know that. They don't immediately realize that what you're doing is the number one point of our job, making people feel something. And a lot of writers forget that. So I am currently making a new show now, as I was saying before, with Paramount. And then because of that, I have to read a lot of scripts. And as I'm reading those scripts, everyone kind of forgets that the core of their job is that, like, you have to get an emotional reaction out of somebody. It's the reason why This Is Us got picked up. It's like, am I crying right now? I'm only in Act 2, Act 3. I'm like sobbing a little bit. By the time you're at Act 6, you're a mess. Like, you're completely destroyed. And they're like, we're gonna do that to you every week. And they just keep figuring out as to like, what is the grindhouse way of making you cry? What is the way to like trigger that? It is very much, like, they'll do it in like very strong character-based ways where they build up to a cry. Maybe even over a season, to like one big one that you're gonna let out. Or they'll do the quick, the equivalent of a horror jump scare of a cry. The way I always think of that is, if you've seen Titanic, when you see the couple just laying in bed as the water's coming in, slowly rising, and they don't care, like, this is how they want to spend that last moment, and you just get like that one little awe right there. I think that is like the romantic emotional equivalent of like a horror jump scare, because it is getting that quick rise out of you. You're locked in, you're going to be there, and it's important because that is specifically what you need for an audience. And not only is it what you need for an audience, is what you need for the rest of the entire industry. It is the key thing that everyone forgets when they're writing everything I've been reading. And a lot of TV shows that you see, sometimes people are just like, plot, 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 and you're like, I'm out. I'm like, I don't care about anyone. And sometimes that works. One movie in particular is plotty until it's just like, oh yeah, we gotta add emotion, and it's a masterpiece, and that'd be like The Matrix, where in that movie you have, Neo, and then you have girl Neo, and then you also have black Neo, and like their personalities are just kind of blended together a bit until they're defined in sequels way later on. But otherwise, those character traits and like how they kind of speak to each other and things like that is very like, everyone's very flat, and they're like flat on purpose because they're throwing so much at you. And then as they start to express, like even when Trinity, coming near the end of the movie, she's like, I am in love with you. And you're like, how did we get there? It happens really, really fast. But you're so bought into the universe and the spectacle of it that it works specifically for the Matrix. And that is something that is like kind of harder to do naturally in other storylines. In other stories, the things that you usually need to build are basically the revelations of relationships, how we get to this point. What is your thesis? What is the reason why any of your characters are doing the things that they're doing? And that is why I love the Grindhouse method. So the only thing that I will say here, because once again, I usually do not like teaching about writing. I'd like to give like short advice and then lead you in the right direction. But this is the one thing that has made my entire career. It is, you take that one moment that you know is like special. You take one thing where it's like, you know, would get a rise out of somebody, where you know, like if it makes you excited, you have to convince your audience like you should be flipping the table right now. If it makes you scared, you should convince your audience to be sweating in this particular moment. Like even if it's like, I want you to know what it feels like to be a 13-year-old girl in middle school right now. And I want to be shrinking in my seat and sweating because the stakes are high for that little girl who just discovered that the clothing she wears is not designer and is actually knockoff before she walks into class. And like you should feel that tension. Or if it's just an action scene and it doesn't have anything kind of like weighted up against it or anything like that, then that's usually like an 80s action movie where they don't necessarily, like it's just like, I have to save my daughter. And you're not fully invested in that. But you're just like, sometimes I like things exploding, which sometimes that works, but not as much as it used to. John Wick had to kill a dog in order to start a franchise. So it was just a really quick way of getting you emotionally invested and falling in with like, yeah, you should definitely murder an entire wave of like an entire mafia because that puppy was adorable. And Grindhouse does that. So a lot of that, I forget what slides I put up, but a lot of it is like focused on different moments where it's like, Hot Fuzz is doing it here, where you see two characters who, like in one of my favorite movies of all time, they've been building to the point where they actually use guns for the entire movie. And like they're in a town where like it just shouldn't exist. It's the most relaxed and peaceful place. But the fact that like they solve the mystery, and the mystery is that they have to beat up the town basically. And like a hilarious action, it's just constant tension rising until you finally get to that point. Or you have Haikyuu here, where I was in complete shock at this is one of my favorite moments in television, where you have the kid actually with blonde hair who is blocking a person who is absolutely impossible to beat in any way. He is the Michael Jordan of their high school sport. And having that character go from a place where he's just like, I don't even like this sport. I don't even like being in this anime. And he finally gets to a point where he's just like, I want to feel something. I just want to feel good at something. I'm like feeling the fire that my teammates have. I want to do this for them. I want to do this for me. And it puts that same fire into your audience. Like you have to get people burning in that moment. Even Fleabag pulls it off by just having you slowly just build to like, will they finally have sex? Will she convince an impossible barrier of that white collar around his neck to become the thing, like to just, can she defeat that? Can she defeat someone's entire belief system because we know that those two are perfect for each other. But because of his faith, it's impossible to have a relationship. And like, will it actually crack? Will there actually be a difference? And you know, one of the best cinematic moments of like the past decade, if not ever, would be Miles Morales finally taking that leap. And it's the summarization of an entire movie. It's him not only discovering like, yeah, I have control over my powers, and I still have a lot of challenges ahead of me, which is the beauty of when he takes the leap, the glass breaks, because that means that he didn't fully release his like fear. His reflexes are that he gets stuck to walls. And the fact that the glass breaks when he takes the leap means that he's not sure that he's actually going to do a good job at this, but I'm gonna do it anyway, which is beautiful and powerful, and the best way to see like a character rising to the occasion by falling towards the city. And whenever you're writing, when you think about like, what's the moment? What's that moment that I want to give my audience where like they walk away and they're just like, that was all worth it for that, or like that all felt like that. It becomes a lot easier to build your story knowing that like that's the heart of what I'm doing. Like everything kind of stems from that moment. You can build your either 3 or 6 act structure around that. And it changes a lot of the reasons why you write. It changes the reasons why you actually want to do any of this. And that creates the other parts that I was talking about early on, where it's like, how am I going to get in this streaming service? How am I going to blah, 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 and everything. Like, it doesn't matter as much when you discover that you love what you write. And that's going to become the most crucial thing, because as you start to write and you start to pass like your work on to other writers, things are going to start getting to a point where you're going to have to start getting notes. You're going to get your network notes. You're going to get your notes from your managers. You're going to get notes from your agents. You're going to get notes from other writers. And they're going to be endless. And people are going to beat them down. But the thing that's going to really affect it all and make everything special is that you still know what it is at the end of the day. You still know what that heart is. You still have that moment. You still have Miles leaping off the building for you. You still know what you're trying to make people feel. And so it becomes that much easier as you're writing. You're suddenly just like, no matter what the note is, if the note isn't servicing the thing that I'm proud of, and the reason why I do this, and why I'm proud I'm doing this, then this note's irrelevant. It's not servicing the story that we want to tell. And if the thing I'm trying to say is even risky, I don't want to say it. I mean, like, well, like I don't want to take that particular note if it's going to take away the risk. One thing that is a huge risk that we've been doing in Blade Runner is the fact that I wanted to point out that Blade Runner really needs to be a trans story, and which is really complicated, because the other thing I wanted to point out was that the Blade Runners are villains. As I was entering that franchise, that was 2 of the things I pointed out, and immediately they're like, we'll get back to you in terms of hiring you, and they didn't contact me for another 3 months. Then they finally came back and they're like, if you could write an outline that's good as to what you would do within a year, then we'll bring you onto the project. And so me and my co-writer, Kay Perkins, we had to sit down and figure out, we have to write a masterpiece in order for them to agree to any of this, and for us to also not piss off Ridley Scott. And so within that time, we started to focus on what are some of the issues that we could smooth out, not break the franchise, not just take a hammer to it, not just like rip it apart and destroy it. We've seen franchises do that, and it doesn't work out well at the end of the day for those individuals. But how would it work for basically taking the concept of what Ridley Scott even intends, or I like to think that his intention in the original, when you see the final cut, there is no narration for Deckard. Like the Harrison Ford narration is completely gone as he's doing his actions. And because of this, he comes off as a villain. You're seeing this from like an equal perspective of like these new replicants, these escaped replicants are looking for their identity. And in this particular moment, and the things that they're searching for, and trying to figure out who they are, this one very like just non-responsive cop to their emotions and their feelings is going around and just assassinating all of them because they also don't have any legal rights. Like they live in like this really terrible world because of that. One of the worst deaths in the movie is Pris, who is like fully in makeup, has like the tutu on. She's discovering her identity. She is becoming just a brand new person. And then he shoots her, and her response isn't to attack him. She just starts kicking and screaming on the ground. And it's because the world she lives in is unfair for her. And that is, I think that is the definition of that entire franchise. So to lean into that, wanted to talk about how a lot of the replicants are discovering their identity and relating that to a lot of people in the trans community who are worried about like just their rights and going forward and just existing without being eliminated by those around them. And meanwhile, you still have everything happening with the Blade Runners as to, we see the last day of Deckard and we see the last day of Kate within the two movies. And that is setting up something in regards to what makes a Blade Runner finally flip. What makes them realize like, I've been doing something horrible this entire time. And you get if you can find ways to recontextualize what is already there, not change it, not break it, but just give more definition as to why it's happening, then those stories and those books that you work on and like everything in every script and every concept becomes a little bit more because you're adding something in terms of like flavor that is the world. You're adding your experiences, because the other thing that you have to do as a writer that I think is just as important is live. Just live your life. Like whenever you're getting staffed in a room, whenever you're getting asked to work on a project or anything like that, a lot of people are just wondering, where did you come from? Like, how did you do this? And like, there's a lot of writers who have a very similar track. Like, I went to Yale, I was there for 4 years. I worked in a mailroom at UTA. Now I'm an assistant. I was an assistant for somewhere around 3 to 4 years. I was a writer's assistant, and then I got the staff, and here I am. And that is, you know, like that is a commendable amount of work to get to that point. It's very hard to do that track. The one thing that is a little bit difficult there, and the reason why I was like plunged into this industry is because a lot of that viewpoint in that particular story is similar. There are a lot of writers who have that track, and sometimes those writers hire each other, and then you just have a room of the same person. And when you have one viewpoint, the writing is a little muddy. It's just everyone agreeing with each other, and then the project comes out weird. It comes out with just not as interesting, and like some characters talk like caricatures of who they actually could be. Like you stop going home with characters of like different backgrounds and stuff like that that don't reflect the rest of the people in the room because they don't know how to talk about them in that way. They don't have that level of intimacy. They don't have that same relationship with the world that those characters would. And so different viewpoints in the world, whether it's like, I've been a chef for 8 years. I have been an Uber driver. Like I want to see an Uber driver show because that is a hell of an experience in terms of the interactions that you have in life. From to a flight attendant, to someone that was in the military, to doctors, to like all those experiences go into the writing and they come up in the room every day. I've shared every experience I've had on this Station 19 firefighter show because every character in that world is just a person of the world, and we have to be as authentic as possible. And the main thing that we need are experiences. And a lot of younger writers are discovering that. And like, they're just like, the best thing I could do is like, when we get vacation time, I just go off and go live. And when they come back, they're like, I have a ton of ideas because I just had a lot of experiences and I met a lot of people and I talked about a lot of things. And that definitely will help you move forward and get hired in your career. But the most important thing is that you love what you do. When you try to do that chasing Ted Lasso thing that we talked about earlier, that's bullshit. Like, they're going to keep telling you that. They're going to keep telling you there's going to be something new. I think the new thing now is like, a lot of networks are like, we want our version of The Arrival, because they're nervous about a show they think it's going to be a big hit, called The Three-Body Problem, based on the novels. And they're like, it's going to be huge, and Netflix already has it. Do you have something like The Arrival? And I'm like, no, I don't. I got like this really weird IP that I made, and here's that. And then you're going to tell me, can you apply it to Digimon live action? And I like money, so sometimes I'm just like, yeah, let's do it. Give me Agumon. Sometimes that works that way, where you're just going to end up falling into taking very unique ideas and placing it into other IP. But if it's something that you love, if it's something that you're passionate about, and if it's a story that you want to push forward and you want to keep to yourself, I can't ask you to be like, don't worry about the money, just keep it for you. Like, no, that's not realistic. Sometimes you want the money. I write Blade Runner and a firefighter show. So yeah, there's clearly like, I am trying to figure that out myself. But at the same time, sometimes you will know when it's just like, I can't compromise this. And this is perfect as it is. And the nice thing is that studio execs don't know what the fuck they're doing. So knowing that you love something so much and seeing how passionate you are about like, no, this is perfect as it is, can sometimes shake them to a point where they're just like, okay, well, I still want to work with you on this. Because they don't know if they just passed up on the next huge franchise. They don't know if they passed up on the next big thing. But if you, in your heart, you know that they are, completely just keep doing what you're doing. Just stick with it. Just hold on to it and keep it as it is. But if you do see a way to turn it into a Sailor Moon reboot, yeah, get your foot in the door. But just love it first. And that makes the rest of this process so much easier. So that puts you in a place where all of these questions are like the biggest questions you'll have going into this industry. And they could all be summarized by, do you love it? Do you want to jump into that grindhouse method? Do you want to, like, have you found the core and the heart of your story? Have you found that pilot where you're just like, this is who I am. This summarizes me. And when you put your pilot out there, it's a scary thing too, because not only is it your resume, you have to also slip a character in there that has like a lot of concepts and ideas that you share in terms of ideology, and they're just like, oh, I know how this writer thinks. And while at the same time being incredibly entertaining, original, and just as exciting or more exciting than anyone else that has come through the door with another script recently. And which is really, really hard. But if you still have that core, if you still have the concept of like, this is an idea that I love, this has that moment, this has that Miles Morales moment of jumping off the building, this leads into that Hot Fuzz third act, like everything explodes and I want you to feel it, I want you to be sweating, I want you to be crying, then no matter what, these will just come. Because everything here from like the person staffing the show, the reps that you're trying to get, and the studios looking for like who are our next writers, they want someone who is just confident in what they know is good. They want confidence from the person that made them cry, or made them mad, or made them like really just like like just body fluids coming out of them while they're reading the script or whatever. And it comes always down to that. How are you making someone feel? And that makes your whole life and your job and your career a whole lot easier, because you also know that the thing I'm cooking tastes really good. Like, I made something really special, and people are going to tell me to change it. People are going to tell me what could be manipulated and whatnot, but you have that core, you have that base to work with, and that makes your life so much better. So, so at the end of the day, the most I can really say is ignore the swear stuff. Ignore all the strikes and the consolidations and stuff like that. Yes, that is a part of the career. Yes, that's really scary right now. Yes, that's part of like what may be a stopping point, or why the pipeline is going to slow down. But at the same time, working on something independent, working on something that isn't immediately related to an IP, and working on something that's not like, am I immediately going to jump into Marvel or DC or anything like that? That's also asking for a million restrictions that you don't even know exist yet. One thing we were talking about in our preamble was that I didn't know I couldn't use the word robot in Blade Runner. That I also don't fully know how replicants work. And when I asked them about it, they're like, but don't explain it. Like, because then because other stuff will fuck up if you start explaining it. And so that entire time, I'm just like, all right, well, getting granular is hard, and I have to base this in specifically a character, and that completely has ejected some really complex storylines that I've had to do. There's something I'm planning within the series where there will be, if you're following the books, thank you, but if you're following the books, something that I am actually trying to build to is a Blade Runner war, which will explain why the movies are as they are right now. And that was something I could have done 2 years ago if they would have gave me more details as to how replicants work. And so because of that, I have had to go through many legal lines to create my own set of replicants in order to explain how a huge chunk of the universe in Blade Runner works. And that is a headache that, trust me, you do not immediately want. It does take a lot of the joy out of writing sometimes. It does, like, I think a nightmare franchise that I would be completely afraid to jump into, personally, would be like Star Wars right now. There's so many versions of Star Wars, but which should be a beautiful thing. It's a diversity of styles. Of like, you could have a Star Wars sitcom, and it will probably be dope. But you would also get berated with people who hate it because it is a sitcom. But you also have, what was it, like The Mandalorian, which is let's be honest, it's the Xena Warrior Princess model. It's like The Mandalorian and The Witcher are not that different in terms of their models. And it's kind of, because of this, it works in that way where it kind of like fits for everybody. But you also have Andor, which is one of the best TV shows I've ever seen in my life. I'm still battling with the question, is it the best show I've ever seen? And it is a model that also doesn't agree with people because it doesn't have the pluckiness and we accidentally won kind of charm that you have in A New Hope. Everyone has a different version of it, and that's okay until you start asking people if it's okay. And it's kind of a weird place to write in a universe, because you technically are like, yeah, I can do whatever I want, but I absolutely cannot. And the thing that you should always strive for is just make the universe that you want, make the world that you want. And then if people want to ask you to bring you into that universe to start writing and building stuff, you have something to negotiate with, because you have your standards, you have your grounds, you created your style, you defined you've built yourself out, and that's the most important thing in this entire industry. And yeah, I'm gonna open the floor to Q&A now if anybody has any questions. Yeah.
Mel, firstly, thank you for taking time to educate, glean the wisdom for us. I'm very appreciative. Screenwriter, I have 3 questions. I apologize.
No, you're good.
First one, I saw American Gods on your bio. Is that based on the book American Gods, just out of curiosity?
Yes, it is.
Cool. I'm currently in the middle of reading that for the first time, so very cool. The second question I had was, in your bio, you have worked for a lot of streaming services and studios, I saw. Do you notice any delineations between the studios of like which ones tend to take greater risks, which ones tend to kind of push people in a box a little bit more? Like, do you know, sense that there are differences between some of them, like Paramount, Disney, Apple Plus?
Yeah, that's a constantly changing and evolving thing. I'll be candid. So can I like really like go nuts with like cursing right now, or?
Nah. Don't go like George Carlin nuts.
Oh yeah, not that. There are some networks that are star fuckers. And that's kind of their entire thing.
What are they called?
They are star lovers, and for example, Apple TV Plus is just like they are totally opening to listening to like this is a new concept and an idea. That's how they end up with a Severance. But at the same time, it's like who is super famous that we could attach to this, both in front of and behind the camera. So if Ben Stiller wasn't there, and Adam, name escaped me, or last name escapes me, wasn't the lead, would not happen. And so you can have an absolutely excellent, perfect script, but because it is risky, you are going around town like kind of like waving it, like somebody please make this for me. So that's kind of like Apple style. Amazon is just in a weird place because we're seeing stuff that they've been making as I started to enter the industry because it took so long. So like Lord of the Rings, they've been making forever and spent literally $1 billion on it. And one other show they spent $800 million on will be coming up next year. And because of that, they don't have as much stuff and they're taking these bold risks. And the risks aren't really paying it off as much, but they're and so now they're in this weird place where they are just like, we're going to have to start finding things that are centered around like tastemakers, which is a weird phrase and something that's pinned on me in my career now, which is like, who are the tastemakers? A tastemaker they consider that's like famous would be like Donald Glover. Yep. And so they gave him an entire Donald Glover verse, and he's filming that now. So has like 3 TV shows he's currently filming at once. He's like staffed Malia Obama on one of the shows, but so that's like the
family with Netflix essentially.
Yeah, and the Netflix style is we don't know. And that's genuinely how they are. Like so the Netflix departments don't talk to each other. And so the comedy team, the anime team, and the drama team, which is like what is left of everyone, and the South Korean team, because the South Korean stuff has been kicking ass. They don't communicate. And so they're just like, oh man, did you guys just make Arcane? Like, how long have you been working on that? Like 5 years. Like I worked down the hall from you, and they're like, I thought you were accounting. And like that's kind of how like they function. But like everyone is out to make the next Stranger Things. Stranger Things really has defined that network heavily in regards to like, we took a big risk and look at where we are. And a lot of Netflix is still trying to do that. I do enjoy the fact that they'll drop something like Kaleidoscope, which I don't know if that entirely works in terms of like what they're going for, like you pick a different path and blah blah blah. But there are bad paths, and the narrative doesn't always work. But I love the fact that it's a risk. It's scary. It's different. And so every network has their own different mandates. The tough thing now is that so many people are getting fired regularly. We don't know, like the executive you're talking to doesn't necessarily know their own mandates, but they're just like, your script was really cool and it made me cry. And we should talk about building something, and then I'll run off and try to figure out who my boss is this week, and then I'll come back and tell you if we could do it or not. And it's that many obstacles and risk. The show I just sold over at Paramount, the day before, that article that I showed over there was about like Paramount layoffs. They released that the day before they announced that my show was sold, which A, now I feel horrible. And then B, two of the producers there actually were in a place where like two of my producers got fired in those layoffs. Two new producers came in, and then the day the article came out, I had to re-pitch it to them. And I had to go through the hustle of figuring out, like, what do you want? Do you have the same concept of the show as me? Can I make you feel passionate about this, etc. So it's an insane place to be in right now.
And thank you for that. My third question is probably going to sound like a dumb question. I know there are dumb questions, but if you're coming into the industry as someone who's trying to write like a trilogy of novels, not screenplays, do you recommend if you're trying to like ultimately get it adapted to like work to present a screenplay first, or can you kind of come in if you have published novels and work with a studio about adapting it? Like, how does that
Write it as a screenplay.
Gotta come in with a screenplay.
Yeah, you wanna do it as a screenplay. Like you can also smell a novel that's trying to be a movie, and and no one wants that. They want to.
If you write it as a novel, but ultimately, like, it would.
But you're hoping it'll be write it as good of a novel without the intention of making it a movie.
Correct. Okay, but then let's say you were to write it as a novel. If you were then looking to try to market something, would your recommendation to still be either work with someone or do it yourself to try to
Correct.
Get it into a screenplay before you're pitching?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sir, you've been very patient.
Well, when you said the word tastemakers, maybe think of the word influencers. Is like the decisions in your industry more like, I'm wondering how influenced it is by popular culture, or just what the executives think will make them money, or all of the above? Like what projects get the green light versus the boot, essentially? Like, do you have any insight into that? Or?
In regards to everything involving like popular culture, for concepts and stuff like that, I see it more happening in casting. You're going to see a lot more YouTubers in movies next to Tom Cruise and stuff, because studios don't know how to talk to Gen Z. And they are terrified because the low numbers in theaters have been happening because Gen Z isn't showing up for a lot. Gen Z showing up for a lot less of Marvel. They're not on DC's bullshit. They like specific types of horror, and they don't know which ones. It's like, why did Smile work? And it was like, I don't know, but make 8 more. And so there's literally like 2 more Smile movies and a TV show in a way, because they're just like, we got them. We got Gen Z for one of them. And so that's the reason why you'll see more of anything that's like pop culture related, if it, even in regards to like influencers and things that are popular in regards to that kind of blowing up. It's in regards to like stories and scripts that get picked up, like, is it very cool right now, is it very stylish right now, or anything like that. They still don't care unless it has like those things that we're just talking about, which is like heavy emotion. That it has to be passionate about something, and it has to feel like something. It could be about something that was like cool 5 years ago, but still make you cry, still make you feel something, and then they'll make it then. There's the Oscar baity movies where it's just like they want to talk about a subject that has been heavily researched and then create a movie about that. And you have to cross your fingers the sensitivity that needs to be there is applied to it. Sort of like the She Said movie that was recently released that was about Me Too. And like that right there was developed with like I haven't seen it. I've heard that it was applied with a lot of tenderness and love and care, but it was also made because they're just like, we can kind of capture this moment right now. And because a lot of indie movies and a lot of smaller scale movies aren't making a whole lot of money, it also ended up in that pile of movies where it's just like, there's not enough spectacle around it. And unfortunately, it also got pushed to the side. But in terms of a lot of stories being picked up due to like whatever is hot or cool right now, nah. That actually doesn't happen a lot. It's all about studios trying to make those things cool, which, you know, like who would have saw Top Gun being the thing that blew up in 2022, you know what I mean? Like a Top Gun comeback being like so popular, and it's a studio making a guess, taking a risk. That movie was done in 2019. It was finished forever ago, and it just came out now. And like when they were about to drop it before, they're like, it's going to flop, and we spent so much money. And now look at it. And like, so even timing is a thing. It's really, really weird. But so yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. But
Yeah, I think so.
I have two questions about the story. But as a writer, how do you make small things help you make visual works for yourself as you're like trying to train yourself? And also, how do you put an idea to a page? Like for me, things just pop in my head as images. I can't draw, unfortunately, like my father. So I try to write them down, but it's hard to describe them.
yeah, actually, like so the second one I can definitely answer. Could you repeat the first one though? Like I want to make sure I got that correct.
Like everyone, when I was as I write, something like don't make something big, start with something small. Like you'll just burn yourself out. So other than small excerpts, like how do I build it up? Like do I make sure it has a conclusion, a rise action, falling action, or should just like make something really short? It's just hard to do unless I have this kind of excerpt or like pace to work on.
Yeah, the simplest way I can say is where do you want your characters and your audience to be by the end of the story? Like what is how do you want people to feel walking out of it? Do you want them to be shocked? Do you want them to feel like proud? Do you want them to feel like I need more or anything like that? And that gives you the space of just like, this is the arc I need to build. And then you have an act structure. You're just like, character starts here, and this actor here, this actor here. They're like going on that roller coaster slope. And then like that real downturn, everything's terrible. And then like, you know, like I am gonna fight for my friends and family. And then I am the person that I should be. Or I am going to have to rise to the occasion to be the person that I need to be in order to reach the end of the story. And that helps you a lot in terms of like, oh, I can figure out what those beats mean because I understand the rhythm of the story. The second question, could you repeat the second question again? I'm sorry.
The second question is how some tips on getting an idea to a paper, because I get images in my head, I'm like, oh, okay, I want to describe it, I'm write this down, this is cool, but I have trouble writing it down. I think it takes like hours and just like a few words.
Yeah, that is definitely feeling both character and environment. One thing that is, like, even if you're not an artist, the thing that you should always focus on is how that character moves around the world, how they feel, how they interact with it, what they do within it, and that'll define how they dress, how they talk, like what struggles that they have within their environment, how are they excelling in their environment, what are the relationships that they have, and that you'll suddenly realize like, oh, this person has like they're very paranoid all the time. So a part of what they wear is like a gas mask on their belt or anything like that. and they may have a yo-yo as a weapon because they're in a place where they could be attacked if they have like a gun on them, but they've definitely become specialized in a skill that would not be expected around them to do anything else, while at the same time they do have like kind of like a stylish outfit or anything like that because they need to look dominant in this space. They need to be noticed, but also be able to be incognito. And so that also tells you the reflection of what the environment looks like. Like you could kind of imagine what I described was like a Neo-Tokyo's type city where it has like those like crucial rules, but also has that stylishness. And that gives you everything you need to kind of like work within that space. And so always think about how your character feels in an environment and sit back, live with them, be in their shoes, because it's going to reflect on everything else you do as you're writing with that character. Gentleman in the gray in the back, I saw you raise your hand before.
It's really cool that your experience kind of transcends a lot of different genres of just storytelling, because a lot of times I hear advice from authors or writers who just have one specific focus. How do you go about learning about and writing for different audiences?
I'm still learning that. It's really hard because it depends on if you're working on a TV show. One thing that's really difficult is that you are never writing for you anymore. What you're writing for is your showrunner. Your responsibility is to write in their voice. I am on Station 19, so my job is to figure out what Shonda Rhimes would do, and like how she would want to execute it, how she would want these characters to talk, and how sexy this fire needs to be, you know. And so it definitely is like a specific focus there in regards to like how she wants to project on her audience. Now, if it's just your audience and who you want to talk to, you are writing for you, and you should not be writing for like, I want to get this audience. I'm sure we've all seen a product or a TV show or something recently where it's just like, you're trying really hard to reach to me right now, and because I can smell you trying to be cool, you're suddenly not cool. And it shows. Never do that. Never just write to be like, I need to be noticed by these people or anything like that. Like, write because you think that this is good, and it'll come out. Like you will find, like your audience will find you, and you won't be able to do it in reverse, which is the problem with networks trying to reach Gen Z. Like they're like give us all the euphorias you can, and that's not going to work. Like euphoria is even something that's watched like ironically a lot of times. So it's like always write it for you if you don't have the mandate of like you need to write like Ridley Scott, you know. We got space for one more. You, sir.
Sure. Right. Just based on your own experience, how important is it to be in the same place where these shows are being made, or like is being working remotely more of a thing now?
I think the writing process is extremely. It's important to have set experience. It is extremely important, and that's something that's going away, and that's really scary. I am on set a lot, and the reason why being on set is really important is that when you're working with actors are scared all the time. They're commonly treated like children, and no matter how famous or attractive that they are regularly did you guys like the thing I did? Did you guys like are you really into that? They're like, yeah. And then the assistant comes up and like, here's your juicy with like the special straw that you have, you know? And then they like write them off in a cart so that way they can go take a nap. And like these are all real things. And while at the same time you're working with a director that's just like, I'm trying to figure out what is the theme that you want to say in this scene. And so you both are like in a corner trying to figure this out. Your line producer comes over and it's just like, the budget. My God. And, you know, and at the same time you have, when you are writing, you have the experience of being on set, you can write to all of these things, but you also can write to what makes a lot of these like actors and directors and everything like that excel. You can set everyone up for success with set experience because you know what you're getting into. And like I think that's really important, but in terms of like staffing and being in a room, I personally believe that we should all be able to do it no matter the location. Everyone shouldn't have to move to LA. And that's something that I am trying to basically personally work on in my career to do for others. For people to be spread out and be the individuals that they are, that make them the special people with their own individual stories around the country and the world for that matter, to be able to unite to make a TV show because that makes it more interesting. For everyone to like have the same experience on the 405, you know, and like being stuck there for 3 hours for coming to the office and everything like that, and everybody to be in the same mood when they get into the room is that is even a part of the like the cannibalization and congealing process of ideas. Kind of happens that way because then we all sit down, we all talk about White Lotus, and then we're accidentally writing White Lotus for 3 hours, and we're like, we gotta throw that 3 hours. You don't want that. And it's more interesting when someone just comes in and they're just like, did you see Chainsaw Man? And like the new episode dropped this morning, and this is how it made me feel. And sometimes it takes someone in another region to do that. Sometimes it takes someone in another place and another mindset. You need that X factor, and the X factor is always going to be the best route. It's always going to be the best person to come in. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have time for one more question? Or?
Sure.
Yeah. So,
how would you go about sharing your work if the stories you want to write are not original IPs, but rather fan fictions for existing IPs?
I would still release them as fan fiction. There's a lot of legal chaos that comes with that, but at the same time, if you have a script that is a sample that you want to release into the world, then that is definitely like, if you've written it and polished it to the T and you put it out there for like reps to find and different writers and stuff like that, that's definitely something you could do. And a lot of, there are reps who like it. There are reps who are like super into it, and they won't necessarily give it to the creators of that show a lot of the time. Like if I were to write like a sample for let's say White Lotus, because it's just on my mind right now, it wouldn't necessarily make it to White Lotus, but it'll make people happy that I can write something like that for something else. You know what I mean? But at the same time, if you write something original, that opens up a world for you. That opens up so many possibilities and a potential of ways that you could go with your career. From, like, he can write something like this, but maybe that means that like he could pivot and write something like this over here too. But it also means that maybe we should just make this thing, which is how Severance happened, where Severance was made with the hope of them being staffed on something else. But then Ben Stiller read it, he's like, we should just make Severance. We should just make this show because it's so good. Why are we making this other thing? And so they threw the other thing away and they just made that, and now it's doing well. So I always say, if you can lean towards original, yes, which is asking a lot. But if you do want to continue to work on something and you want to make it a bit more official than fan fiction, don't expect like any money from it, but use it as a sample as to like, I am a writer and I do have ideas. Yeah. But yeah, thank you everyone. I appreciate everyone for coming out. I also have a bunch of Blade Runner books I was going to give away. What was it? So I'll be out in the hall if you want anything signed or anything like that. But yeah, it was such a pleasure. Thank you for having me.